Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Toby had always been a dreamer. While other kids spent their time playing outside, Toby preferred to escape into his imagination. His bedroom walls were covered with drawings of strange creatures and fantastical landscapes, each one more bizarre than the last. But lately, his dreams had taken a darker turn. Every night he'd have been visited by nightmares, shadowy monstrous figures that chased him through endless twisted versions of the worlds he created. It had been happening for weeks now, and Toby found himself dreading sleep. His mom had noticed too. She'd ask, "Are you all right, honey?" when she caught him staring off into space, but Toby didn't know how to explain it. How could he tell her that the things he imagined were turning against him? So he said nothing and hoped the nightmares would stop. But they didn't. That night, as Toby crawled into bed, he glanced at the sketches pinned to his wall. His favorite, a tall, spindly tree with glowing blue fruits, stared back at him. For a moment, he felt a flicker of reassurance, but it quickly faded as his eyelids grew heavy. He fell into a deep sleep. When Toby opened his eyes, he found himself standing in the middle of a vast field. The grass beneath his feet shimmered in hues of gold and silver, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. Above, the sky was painted in soft pastels, pinks, blues, and purples, all swirling together like watercolors on a canvas. It was beautiful. This was the dream world he knew so well, the one he'd escaped to for as long as he could remember. But something was different. In the distance, he saw a massive shimmering gate. It stood at least 20 feet tall, carved from what looked like pure silver with intricate patterns etched into its surface. The gate seemed alive, pulsing with a soft, otherworldly glow. Toby had never seen it before, and yet he felt an inexplicable pull toward it. Without thinking, his feet moved, step by step. He drew closer until he was standing right in front of the towering structure. The air around it hummed with energy. His hand reached out, fingers brushing the cool surface of the gate, and then it swung open with a low creak. On the other side, the world was darker, colder. The vibrant colors of the dreamscape faded to muted tones of gray and blue. Toby's heart raced, but his feet continued forward, crossing the threshold into this new, strange place. He didn't get far before he heard a voice. "About time you showed up, dreamer." Toby spun around, startled. A sleek, black cat sat on a nearby rock, watching him with sharp yellow eyes. But this wasn't an ordinary cat. It had silver markings along its back that glowed faintly, and its tail swayed lazily behind it as if it had all the time in the world. Who are you?" Toby stammered. The cat stretched, yawning, named Silence. "Felix, I may have been waiting for you." "Waiting for me?" Felix hopped off the rock, padding over to Toby. "You're the dreamer, aren't you? The one who creates this world with your mind." Toby blinked. I guess, but I didn't make you." Felix smirked. "Oh, you did? Whether you realize it or not, everything here in this place comes from your imagination, but we have a bit of a problem, kid." Toby's stomach twisted. "What kind of problem?" Felix's expression grew serious. "Nightmares. They've been leaking into the dream world, corrupting it, and from the looks of things, you read the sword." Toby's blood ran cold. "What? How I don't want nightmares. I hate them." "Yeah, well, fear's a funny thing," Felix said, flicking his tail. "It has a way of sneaking into places it doesn't belong, and right now your fears are causing quite the mess." Toby took a step back, panic rising in his chest. "But what am I supposed to do?" Felix's eyes narrowed. "You were gonna fix it. Come on." The cat turned and began walking down a narrow path that wound through the gloomy landscape. Toby hesitated but followed as they walked. The world around them seemed to grow even darker. The sky above turned a stormy shade of gray, and the once lush grass beneath their feet became brittle and dry. Toby's mind raced with questions. "Where are we going?" "To the nightmare zone," Felix said over his shoulder. "That's where the corruption is coming from. And if we don't stop it soon, it's going to consume the whole dream world." The nightmare zone, Toby had heard of it before in his dream. It was the place where his worst fears lived, a dark corner of his mind that he tried to avoid at all costs. But now it seemed like there was no escaping it. As they walked, the path grew steeper, and strange figures began to appear in the shadow. At first, Toby thought they were just tricks of the light, but then he saw them more clearly, twisted, distorted creatures with glowing red eyes. They watched him from the darkness, whispering unintelligible things that made his skin crawl. Toby clutched his arms, trying to steady his breathing. I don't think I can do this. Felix glanced back at him, his expression unreadable. You just don't know it yet. Suddenly a soft glow appeared in the distance. As they got closer, Toby realized it was coming from a strange floating creature that looked like a giant jellyfish. Its body pulsed with a warm golden light and its long tendril-like appendages floated gracefully in the air. Loomis Felix called out. The jellyfish-like creature drifted toward them, its light growing brighter as it approached. Felix, you found the dreamer, it said in a soft, echoing voice. Toby stared up at Loomis, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over him. What are you? I am a guardian of the dream world, Loomis replied. My purpose is to protect this realm from the darkness. But lately, the nightmares have been growing stronger. I can only do so much. Toby swallowed hard, and it's my fault. Loomis floated closer, its light bathing Toby in a soothing glow. Not entirely. Nightmares are a natural part of the dream world, but they have become more powerful because of your fear. Fear gives them strength. Toby's shoulders slumped. So what do I do? Felix hopped onto a nearby rock, watching Toby intently. You face them. Head on its end, the only way to stop them. Toby's heart pounded in his chest. Face his nightmares. The very idea made him want to run in the opposite direction. But deep down he knew Felix was right. He couldn't keep running from his fears forever. They continued their journey with Loomis lighting the way. As they approached the nightmare zone, the air grew colder, and the landscape became even more twisted. The ground was cracked and uneven, with jagged rocks jutting out like broken teeth. The sky was an inky black, and the wind howled through the desolate terrain. Finally, they reached the edge of a massive chasm. On the other side stood a towering fortress made of dark, jagged stone. It loomed over the landscape like a menacing shadow, and Toby could feel the weight of its presence pressing down on him. The Nightmare Lord is in there, Felix said, his voice low. He's the one behind all of this. Toby stared at the fortress, his stomach churning with dread. The Nightmare Lord, he'd heard of him before, in fleeting nightmares, but he'd never seen him. The idea of facing such a powerful being made his legs feel like jelly. How do we stop him? Toby asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Felix's eyes gleamed in the dim light. Loomis floated closer, its light flickering softly. You have more power than you realize, Toby. The dream world is shaped by your imagination. You can create anything you need to defeat the Nightmare Lord. You just have to believe in yourself. Toby seen Mind World. He had created this world, hadn't he? All the creatures, the landscapes, they had come from his imagination. But facing the Nightmare Lord, that felt like something entirely different. Felix jumped down from the rock and started across the narrow bridge that spanned the chasm. Come on, we don't have time to waste. Toby hesitated for a moment, then followed, his heart pounding in his chest. As they crossed the bridge, the wind howled louder, and the shadows seemed to move around them. As Toby and Felix reached the other side of the bridge, the oppressive air grew heavier. The towering fortress loomed above them, its jagged spires disappearing into the pitch-black sky. Toby's palms were clammy, and his legs felt unsteady, but Felix pressed forward without hesitation. Loomis floated close behind its warm glow, the only thing piercing the suffocating darkness. They entered the fortress through a massive iron door that groaned as it opened. Inside, the temperature dropped even further, and the walls seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. Shadows moved along the stone, flickering like living creatures just out of sight. Toby's breath caught in his throat as his footsteps echoed through the cavernous hall. Felix looked back at him, his yellow eyes glinting in the low light. You ready, kid? The Nightmare Lord is waiting. Toby swallowed hard, his mouth dry. I think so. The truth was, Toby wasn't sure. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to turn back, to wake up and escape this nightmare. But he knew he couldn't tell. This wasn't just about him anymore. The dream world, the place he had escaped to for so long, was in danger, and it was his fault. They followed a long, winding corridor that twisted deeper into the fortress. The further they went, the darker it became. Toby's heart raced with every step, and the walls seemed to close in around him, pressing against his chest. It was as if the fortress itself was alive, feeding off his fear. Finally, they reached a vast chamber at the heart of the fortress. The ceiling was so high that it vanished into the darkness above. In the center of the room stood a figure cloaked in shadow, a towering, monstrous presence that seemed to suck the light from the air. Toby's stomach turned to ice as he realized who it was. The Nightmare Lord. It stood still, watching them with glowing red eyes that pierced through the gloom. Its form was constantly shifting, as though it were made of darkness itself. Every now and then, a twisted claw or jagged horn would emerge from the shadows, only to disappear again into the swirling black mass. The air around it crackled with dark energy. Felix bared his teeth, his fur bristling. "That's him, kid. You need to take him down." Toby took a step forward, his legs trembling. The Nightmare Lord's solemn gaze locked onto him, and an overwhelming sense of dread washed over him. It was like being submerged in ice-cold water, unable to breathe or move. Every fear Toby had ever felt seemed to flood his mind all at once, paralyzing him. "I've been waiting for you," the Nightmare Lord said, its voice low and rumbling, like thunder rolling through the air. "You who brought me into existence, you who feed me with your every doubt and fear." Toby's throat tightened. "I didn't mean to." The Nightmare Lord laughed, a deep, hollow sound that echoed through the chamber. "It doesn't matter what you meant. I am here now, and I am stronger than you could ever imagine." Toby felt the weight of his fear pressing down on him. He wanted to run to wake up and leave this nightmare behind, but he couldn't. He had to stop that. "You can tie when." The Nightmare Lord continued, its form shifting and growing larger. "You are weak. You are nothing but a scared little boy." Toby squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the voice. But it was right, wasn't it? He was just a kid. What could he do against something like this? His breath came in short, shallow gasps, and the world seemed to spin around him. Then he felt something warm against his hand. Opening his eyes, he saw Loomis hovering beside him, its golden light flickering gently. "You are not alone, Toby," it whispered. "You have the power to change this world. You always have." Toby looked at Loomis, then at Felix, who stood defiantly beside him, ready to fight. They believed in him. They believed he could do this. A spark of determination flared in Toby's chest. He couldn't let the Nightmare Lord win. Not this time. Not ever. Taking a deep breath, Toby focused his mind, trying to remember what Loomis had told him. The dream world was shaped by his imagination. He could create anything he needed. He just had to believe. As the Nightmare Lord's shadowy form loomed closer, Toby clenched his fists and closed his eyes, picturing anything that could help. He imagined a sword, gleaming and bright, made of pure light that could cut through the darkness. He could feel it taking shape in his mind, the warmth of the hilt, the weight of it in his hand. When he opened his eyes, the sword was there, glowing with a brilliant white light that pushed back the shadows. The Nightmare Lord paused, its eyes narrowing. "So you think you can fight me?" it hissed. Toby raised the sword, his grip tightening around the hilt. "I don't just think I know." With a surge of confidence, Toby stepped forward, the light from his sword cutting through the darkness. The Nightmare Lord roared in fury, its form shifting and writhing as it lunged toward him. But Toby didn't flinch. He swung the sword, and the blade sliced through the shadows like butter, sending a burst of light into the room. The Nightmare Lord recoiled, its form flickering and unstable. But it wasn't done yet. With a snarl, it lashed out, tendrils of darkness wrapping around Toby's legs, pulling him toward the ground. Panic surged through him as the shadows tightened their grip. For a moment, the fear threatened to overwhelm him again. But then he remembered something his mom had told him once when he was younger. "Fear only has power if you give it power," she had said. Toby took a deep breath, focusing on the light of the sword in his hand. He wouldn't give in to fear. Not now, not ever. With a shout, he slashed at the tendrils of darkness, cutting them away. The shadows fell back, and Toby surged forward, swinging the sword again and again. Each strike sent waves of light through the room, weakening the Nightmare Lord with every blow. But the Nightmare Lord wasn't finished yet. It let out a deafening roar, and the ground beneath Toby's feet shook violently. The walls of the fortress cracked, and chunks of stone began to fall from the ceiling. Toby stumbled, trying to keep his balance as the entire chamber seemed to come apart around him. "You may destroy me, dreamer," the Nightmare Lord snarled, "but you will never escape your fear." Toby gritted his teeth, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to finish this. He had to stop the Nightmare Lord, once and for all. Summoning every ounce of courage he had left, Toby raised the sword high above his head, the blade glowing brighter than ever before. With a final powerful swing, he brought the sword down, striking the Nightmare Lord at its core. There was a blinding flash of light, followed by a deafening silence. When the light faded, Toby found himself standing in the middle of the chamber, his chest heaving with exhaustion. The nightmare lord was gone. The shadows had vanished, and the fortress was crumbling around him. But he had won. Felix padded up beside him, his tail swishing back and forth. "Not bad, kid," he said with a grin. "I didn't think you had it in you." Toby managed a tired smile. "I didn't he either." Loomis floated over, its light warm and comforting. "You've saved the dream world, Toby. The nightmares are gone." Toby felt a wave of relief wash over him. It was over. He had done it. As they made their way out of the crumbling fortress, Toby couldn't help but feel a strange sense of peace. The dream world was his, again a place of wonder and imagination. No longer tainted by fear, he had faced his worst nightmare and come out stronger. When Toby finally woke up, he found himself lying in his bed, the morning sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment, he just lay there, staring at the ceiling, letting the events of the night sink in. He wasn't afraid anymore. Toby got out of bed, glancing at the drawings on his wall. The fantastic creatures and strange landscapes looked back at him, but now they seemed different, more vibrant, more alive. And as Toby stood there, a small knowing smile spread across his face. He had faced the darkness, and now he was ready for whatever dreams lay ahead.